They mocked her rags at the mating ball, until the Alpha King covered her with his crown veil. The evening sun dipped behind the spires of Silver Spire Palace, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets of Urindor. The kingdom's nobles were already gathering in the grand ballroom, their silks and jewels glimmering like stars. Laughter echoed off the marble walls, a melody of wealth and privilege that belonged only to those born into the gilded lines of kings and queens. Lyra stood at the edge of the plaza, her hands clutching the worn hem of her tattered dress. She had no jewels, no silk, no mask to hide her humble birth. The city's torches flickered across her face, revealing pale skin streaked with dust, and eyes that held more fire than anyone expected from someone so meek in appearance. Her heart pounded like a war drum in her chest. She should not have been here. She knew that. Yet against all logic she had stepped into the lion's den, drawn by the whispered stories of the mating ball, a place where fates could change with a glance, where whispers could crown or destroy. Inside, the ballroom was alive with light and music. Crystal chandeliers glimmered, spilling molten gold across polished marble floors. The scent of roses and exotic spices lingered in the air, mingling with the quiet hum of whispered conversations. Nobles in finery moved gracefully, their smiles practiced, their laughter calculated. When Lyra entered, the room seemed to shift. Eyes flicked toward her rags and whispers rippled like waves. "Who is she?" a woman asked, her voice dripping with mockery. "She must have wandered in from the slums," another replied, smirking. Lyra felt the sting of shame, but she held her head high. She would not bow, would not shrink into herself, no matter how sharp the blades of ridicule were. Her fingers tightened around the small charm she wore at her neck, a simple silver pendant her mother had given her, a charm said to hold protection and hope, though she doubted it would help tonight. Then he appeared, King Kalen, the Alpha King of Urindor. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that seemed to pierce through the very fabric of truth. His presence was commanding, undeniable. Even the most arrogant nobles fell silent as he passed, their whispers dying on their lips. Kalen's gaze, sharp and discerning, rested upon Lyra. There was a pause, a weight that made the air thick with tension. He did not laugh. He did not turn away. He simply watched, and in his eyes, Lyra saw something she had never expected, curiosity, maybe even interest. One of the court ladies sneered at Lyra's rags, stepping closer to mock her further. The murmurs of the room rose to a crescendo. Lyra's cheeks burned with embarrassment, and she felt the weight of every cruel word. But before anyone could speak again, Kalen moved. His hand rose slowly, almost ceremoniously, and he drew from his cloak the golden crown veil, a delicate, silken fabric threaded with gold and amethysts, the symbol of his power and authority. He approached Lyra, his stride deliberate, and draped the crown veil over her shoulders. The silk fell over her ragged dress, shimmering in the candlelight, transforming her instantly. The room went silent. Eyes widened, lips parted. Lyra froze. She could not believe what had just happened. The veil was heavy in her hands, warm and alive, like it carried the weight of the kingdom itself. Her heart beat wildly, a mixture of fear and awe. She dared to look up at Kalen. He was watching her, not with pity, not with mockery, but with something she could not name, a recognition, perhaps, of a fire he had not expected to find in one so seemingly powerless. "You will stand with me," he said, his voice low and commanding, echoing across the hall like a distant storm. "Not beneath me, not behind me, but beside me." The courtiers gasped. Such audacity, a girl of rags, a nobody claiming space beside the Alpha King. Yet Kalen's eyes dared anyone to challenge him. The power in the room shifted. Whispers turned to murmurs of speculation, some shocked, some intrigued. Lyra's cheeks flushed, not from shame this time, but from a strange, unfamiliar pride. She stood taller. She met his gaze steadily. For a moment the room seemed to vanish, and it was just her and the king, two souls circling the edge of a dangerous storm. But the magic of the moment was fragile. Shadows moved at the edges of the grand hall, unseen yet felt. A figure hidden behind a balcony railing watched Lyra with a gaze full of malice. This presence brought with it a coldness that seeped into her bones, a promise of danger that no crown veil could hide. Kaelin, unaware of the shadow, turned back to the ballroom. "Tonight she is under my protection," he announced, voice ringing with authority. "Any who dare mock her shall answer to me." The nobles faltered. The room's energy shifted from ridicule to curiosity and perhaps just a touch of fear. Lyra's chest rose and fell rapidly. She had never felt anything like this. The collision of humiliation, honor, and the strange, intoxicating pull of a destiny that might be larger than her imagination had allowed. Music resumed, slower now, more deliberate. The dancers moved across the floor, but Lyra felt almost suspended in the moment, caught between who she had been and who she might become. Kaelin's gaze remained fixed on her, a silent tether that pulled at her heart in ways she did not yet understand. Later, in the quieter corridors of the palace, Kaelin approached her. The hall was dimly lit by torches, their flickering flames casting dancing shadows. "Lyra," he said softly, though the sound of his voice carried weight, "the world will try to define you. Let them try. Your power, your fire, it cannot remain hidden forever." Lyra swallowed, uncertain how to respond. She had spent her life hiding, avoiding attention, surviving in the shadows of others. Now, standing in the glow of Kaelin's presence, she felt the stirrings of something dangerous and exhilarating possibility. "But why me?" she whispered, almost to herself. "Why would a king notice a girl in rags?" Kaelin's eyes softened for a brief moment. "Because you are not just a girl in rags. You are a storm waiting to rise, and storms have a way of changing everything." The words left a shiver down her spine. She had always thought storms were destructive, chaotic, dangerous. But perhaps they were also necessary for growth, for change, for awakening. As the night deepened, Lyra wandered the palace gardens, the crown veil trailing behind her like a river of gold. Moonlight spilled across the cobblestones and fountains, illuminating the edges of the magical world she had only glimpsed in stories. Here, the laughter of nobles was replaced by the soft whispers of the wind, the gentle rustle of leaves, and the quiet pulse of life beyond the palace walls. And then she felt it, a prickle of awareness at the edge of her senses, a shadow shifting between the ancient hedges. Eyes watching, intent and cold. The first hint of a threat she could not yet name, a danger drawn to the power that pulsed faintly in her veins. Lyra's fingers tightened on the crown veil. She was not afraid, not entirely. She had survived far worse than the judgment of nobles, and she would survive this too. Yet a part of her, deep within, knew that the storm Kaelin had spoken of was no longer just metaphor. It was real, and it was coming for her. Kaelin appeared silently beside her, as if sensing her thoughts, his presence steady and grounding. He placed a hand on her shoulder, the warmth of his touch searing and protective all at once. "They will not touch you," he said. "Not tonight, not ever while I am here." Lyra looked up at him, the weight of the crown veil settling upon her shoulders, a symbol now of more than authority or protection. It was a challenge, an invitation, a beginning. The shadow in the garden shifted, retreating for the moment, but the danger had been acknowledged. The first threads of fate had been woven, delicate but unbreakable. Lyra's journey had begun, and nothing in the world of kings, curses, or magic would ever allow her to remain the same. And in that moment, standing in the moonlight with Kaelin at her side, she felt it. The stirring of power, the pull of destiny, and the whisper of a future where rags could be transformed into gold, not just by a king's veil, but by the courage that burned fiercely within her. A whisper in the dark promised her that the night was only the beginning, and that the shadow watching her would soon step from the edges of the world into the heart of her life, bringing challenges, choices, and a test of the fire within her soul. Lyra tightened her grip on the veil and breathed deeply. She would meet the storm. She would rise, and when it came, the world would remember her name. The moonlight gleamed on her shoulders, gilded by the golden veil, as the distant echo of footsteps suggested that the shadow had not vanished. And the first part of her story ended with a heartbeat, a whisper, a promise. Everything had changed, and nothing would ever be the same. The night had grown heavy over Silver Spire Palace, and the moon hung like a silver sentinel over the city of Urindor. Its pale light streamed through the high windows, painting the grand hall in ghostly patterns. Lyra stood near the marble balcony, the golden crown veil draped over her shoulders, the threads glinting in the moonlight. Every corner of the palace seemed to whisper secrets she could not yet understand, and her heart thumped with equal parts fear and fascination. King Kalen appeared silently behind her, as if the shadows themselves had carried him there. His presence was always sudden, commanding, yet strangely comforting. "You must not wander alone," he said, his voice low and resonant, carrying a weight of authority she could not ignore. "The palace is full of eyes that see too much and hearts that envy more." Lyra turned to face him, her eyes meeting his with quiet defiance. "I am not afraid of whispers," she said softly, though a shiver ran down her spine. "I have lived with worse than whispers." Kalen studied her, his sharp eyes scanning her, searching for some hidden truth. There was fire in her gaze, a defiance that intrigued him more than any courtly beauty could. "And yet," he said, "the whispers may not be the greatest danger tonight." Lyra frowned, uncertain what he meant. He did not explain, only extended a hand toward her. "Come," he said. "There are places you must see and truths you must know." She hesitated for a heartbeat, then took his hand. The warmth of his touch was grounding, yet it carried an undercurrent of power she felt deep in her chest. Together, they moved through winding corridors lined with ancient tapestries, their footsteps echoing softly, until they reached a quiet chamber tucked away from the prying eyes of the court. The room was dimly lit by a single crystal lantern, casting golden reflections across polished floors. The air smelled faintly of old parchment and incense. Kalen gestured for her to sit on the velvet chaise near the window. "This room," he said, "is a place where truths are revealed away from the world's gaze. Tonight you will learn why you cannot remain hidden." Lyra's hands gripped the edge of the chaise, her mind racing. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I am nothing, just a girl from the city. Why does this matter to you?" Kalen stepped closer, his gaze steady. "Nothing about you is ordinary. You carry a bloodline that has long been forgotten, yet its power sleeps within you. A power that can either protect or destroy if left untamed." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. "Power," she repeated. I do not know what you mean." Kalen moved to the window, letting the moonlight wash over them both. "Your ancestors were keepers of an ancient magic," he explained. "A gift and a curse. Few know of its existence and fewer still have survived its awakening. You may think you are ordinary, but that is an illusion. You are extraordinary and dangerous." Lyra's mind swirled. She had always felt different, a strange pulse beneath her skin, a fire in her veins she could not explain. But she had never imagined it was anything beyond imagination. Now, standing before the king, she realized that her life had been built upon secrets she did not yet understand. "Why tell me this now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why not let me live in ignorance?" Kalen's expression softened, though the edge of command remained. "Because ignorance will not protect you. You are no longer a girl of rags. You are under my protection, and soon the world will demand to know what you can do. And if you are unprepared," he paused, letting the weight of his words sink in, "it could destroy you." The room fell silent, save for the distant hum of the city outside. Lyra's mind raced, a mix of fear and awe twisting inside her. "And what am I supposed to do?" she asked quietly. Kalen's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly, though his presence remained unwavering. "Learn," he said simply. "Learn who you are, what you can become. Control the fire within you before it controls you, and trust that I will be here to guide you." Lyra swallowed, uncertainty battling the spark of courage that had always burned in her chest. "And if I fail?" Kaelin stepped closer, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Then I will fail with you, but we will not fail, not if you are willing to fight." The weight of his words settled over her like a mantle. She felt something stir deep within, a tremor of power that had lain dormant for years. It was faint, subtle at first, but undeniable. Her pulse quickened, and the edges of the crown veil shimmered as though reacting to her awakening. "Do you feel that?" Kaelin asked, his voice low. "That is your bloodline. It waits, and it is impatient." Lyra nodded, fear and wonder twisting together in her chest. "It is strange. I feel like I am, alive in a way I have never been before." Kaelin's expression softened, and for a brief moment he looked less like the Alpha King and more like a man who had borne a lifetime of burdens. "That is the beginning," he said. "The first step toward mastering yourself and the power that will define your destiny." For hours, he guided her through lessons in control, patience, and focus. He taught her to sense the energy around her, to recognize the faint currents of magic that threaded through the palace and the world beyond. Lyra struggled at first, frustrated by her own limitations, but Kaelin's steady presence gave her courage. "You are stronger than you think," he said, observing her attempts. "But strength without control is dangerous. Remember that." By midnight, Lyra's frustration had given way to determination. She could feel the power in her veins, subtle and coiled like a serpent ready to strike. Each breath, each heartbeat seemed to pulse with it. She had never felt so alive or so afraid. Kaelin watched her silently for a moment, then spoke again. "There is more you must know," he said. "Your bloodline is not only powerful, it is sought after. There are those who would use your abilities for their own ends. And there are those who would see you destroyed before you even have a chance to understand yourself." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "Then, I must be careful," she whispered. "Yes," Kaelin said, "but caution alone will not protect you. You must learn to embrace your strength, to face your fears, and to trust yourself, even when the world doubts you." A sudden noise outside the chamber made them both tense. A shadow moved in the hallway, quick and deliberate. Kaelin's eyes narrowed. "Someone is here," he said. "And they are not here by chance." Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. The palace, once a place of grandeur and fascination, now felt like a labyrinth of danger. She gripped the crown veil tightly, her mind racing. Kaelin moved toward the door, his posture coiled like a predator ready to strike. "Stay close," he instructed. "Do not let them see fear in your eyes. Fear is a weapon they will use against you." The corridor was dark, lit only by the faint glow of enchanted torches. The shadow moved quickly, silent and precise, but Kaelin's instincts were sharper. Within moments they had cornered the intruder, a slender figure cloaked in black, masked and silent. The figure froze, recognizing the power radiating from Lyra and the authority emanating from Kaelin. "Who sent you?" Kaelin demanded, his voice a low growl that reverberated through the hall. The figure said nothing, only bowed slightly before vanishing in a swirl of shadow, leaving behind an icy chill. Lyra's hands trembled slightly as she clutched the veil. "They will return," Kaelin said, his tone both warning and protective. "And next time they will not come empty-handed. You must be ready. The world that has ignored you until now will soon demand everything you are." Lyra nodded, determination replacing fear. She had stepped into a world larger, darker, and more dangerous than she could have imagined. And yet, alongside Kaelin, she felt the first real stirrings of courage, and the beginnings of a bond that could weather storms both seen and unseen. As the night deepened, the palace seemed to hold its breath. Lyra, draped in the crown veil, felt the pulse of destiny against her skin. The lessons she had learned, the power she had begun to awaken, and the presence of the king at her side all whispered the same truth. Her life would never be ordinary again. Outside the chamber window, The moonlight glimmered on distant rooftops, and a shadow slipped through the darkness, a silent reminder that forces beyond the palace walls were already moving. Lyra's journey had begun, and the path ahead would test her courage, her heart, and the very fire within her. And in that silence, as the moon bathed her in silver light, Lyra felt the first tremor of destiny stir, a tremor that promised danger, wonder, and the awakening of a power she had only just begun to understand. The night was far from over, and the shadow that had watched her from the edges of the world was moving closer. Her heart raced, her pulse sang, and her destiny whispered. Everything was changing, and nothing would ever be the same. The forest outside Urindor stretched endlessly under the pale glow of the moon. Ancient trees loomed like guardians, their twisted branches whispering secrets to the wind. Lyra walked beside King Kaelin, her heart still racing from the events in the palace. The shadow that had followed her through the halls was gone for now, but its presence lingered in her thoughts, a dark promise of danger. Kaelin moved silently, a figure of strength and purpose, his senses alert to every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs. Lyra noticed the way his hand hovered near his sword, ready, though his eyes never left her. She felt both protected and unsettled, aware that the world outside the palace was as unpredictable as her own awakening power. "Why here?" Lyra asked quietly, her voice barely louder than the wind. "Why not return to the palace?" Kaelin's gaze softened as he looked at her. "The palace is safe for those born into it. For you, safety is an illusion. Here, among the trees and shadows, you can learn who you are without eyes judging your every move." Lyra nodded slowly. She had never felt at ease in the palace, despite the crown veil and Kaelin's protection. Nobles whispered, watching her, testing her, questioning her right to even exist in their world. Here, under the quiet canopy of leaves, she could breathe, though a tension still thrummed beneath her skin, the thrill and terror of the unknown. As they moved deeper into the forest, Lyra felt a subtle change within herself. A warmth spread through her veins, faint and alive, as though the forest itself recognized her presence. It had begun in the palace, when Kaelin first draped his crown veil over her shoulders, but here, alone among the ancient trees, the power in her blood stirred more strongly. "Lyra," Kaelin said, his voice serious, "do you feel it?" She paused, closing her eyes. The air hummed, almost like a heartbeat vibrating against her chest. "Yes," she whispered, "it's strange, stronger than before, and urgent." "Good," he replied. "That urgency is the awakening of your bloodline. It is dangerous, yes, but it is also your strength. You cannot hide it, nor should you. You must learn to control it." Lyra's mind raced. She had always been cautious, hiding herself among the shadows of the city. She had survived hunger, cold, and the scorn of others. But this power, this fire, was something different. It demanded courage, demanded risk, demanded that she step into the light even if the world sought to burn her. They reached a small clearing, bathed in moonlight. The ground was soft with moss, and a crystal-clear stream ran through its center, reflecting the stars above. Kaelin gestured for her to sit. "This is where your lessons begin," he said. "You will not simply learn to survive, you will learn to command the power within you. And I will be here to guide you, though you must walk part of this path alone." Lyra swallowed her fear and nodded. She sat cross-legged on the moss, letting the forest's quiet seep into her bones. Kaelin knelt before her, his gaze intense yet gentle. "Close your eyes," he instructed. "Listen to your heartbeat. Feel the pulse of the world around you. It is not only in you, Lyra. It is in the earth, the trees, the water, even the wind. All things are connected." She obeyed, drawing deep breaths, trying to calm the storm inside her. At first, nothing happened. Then slowly she began to sense it, the faint currents of magic threading through the forest, brushing against her consciousness like invisible fingers. Her heartbeat quickened. She felt the veil of her own fear lifting, replaced by a pulse of something raw, alive, and undeniable. "That is it," Kaelin whispered. "You feel it. Your power is alive. Do not be afraid of it. It is not your enemy, it is your ally. But the forest did not remain peaceful. A sudden rustling in the trees made both of them tense. Shadows shifted, moving with unnatural speed. Lyra's pulse jumped, and the warmth of her power flared in response, like a beacon to whatever had approached. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in black, similar to the one they had seen at the palace, but larger, more menacing. Its face remained hidden beneath a hood, and the air around it seemed to thrum with dark energy. "You are far from the palace, little wolf," the figure said, voice smooth yet chilling, "and yet you carry the crown's blessing." Kalen stepped forward, placing himself between Lyra and the intruder. "Step back. You are not welcome here," he said firmly. His voice carried the weight of authority, but the figure only laughed, a sound like leaves cracking under ice. "You underestimate what I seek," it said. "She is the key, and I will not be denied." Lyra felt fear rise in her chest, but also something else, determination. The crown veil shimmered on her shoulders, responding to her heartbeat, and she felt the first conscious control of her magic. She lifted her hands instinctively, a pulse of energy radiating outward in a faint glow. The figure staggered slightly, surprised. Kalen's eyes widened in recognition. "You are stronger than you know," he said quietly. "But do not waste your power, focus it, control it." Lyra drew a deep breath, centering herself. The forest around her seemed to hum in response to her will. Slowly she extended her hands again, directing the energy outward. The shadow reeled back, unprepared for the strength of her awakening. "You are learning quickly," Kalen said. "But remember, strength without wisdom is dangerous. Do not let anger or fear guide you. Let your heart guide you, and your mind will follow." The figure in black vanished in a swirl of shadows, leaving an icy chill behind. Lyra lowered her hands, trembling but triumphant. She had faced danger and survived, and more importantly, she had begun to understand the power that had always been a part of her. "You did well," Kalen said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "But this is only the beginning. The world is full of those who will seek to control or destroy you. You must learn to trust yourself before anyone else can." Lyra nodded, feeling the weight of his words. Trusting herself had always been difficult. She had spent her life hiding, doubting, and surviving. But now, under Kalen's guidance, she felt the first stirrings of confidence, the beginnings of belief in her own strength. For the next days, they remained in the forest, training, learning, and growing. Lyra learned to sense the subtle currents of magic in the air, to shape them with thought and will, and to temper the wild flames of her power with focus. Kalen watched her closely, guiding her with patience and quiet intensity. At night they would sit by the stream, and Kalen would tell stories of the kingdom, of ancient battles, and of the prophecies that hinted at Lyra's role in the future. She listened, captivated, as the bond between them deepened. There was a quiet intimacy in these moments, a connection forged not in romance alone but in shared purpose, mutual respect, and the recognition of strength in each other. One night, under the silver glow of the moon, Lyra finally spoke of her fears. "I am afraid," she admitted softly, "afraid of what I can do and afraid of what will happen if I fail." Kalen's expression softened. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Fear is not weakness. It is a sign that you care, that you are alive. But do not let it control you. You have the power to shape your destiny, Lyra, and I will not let anyone stand in your way, not while I breathe." Lyra looked into his eyes, seeing not only strength but vulnerability, a man who had carried burdens she could only begin to imagine. "And if I lose control," she asked. "Then I will be here," he said simply, "and together we will rise from the ashes." That is what the crown veil represents. It is not just protection, it is a promise. You are not alone. But their peace was fleeting. One evening, while Lyra practiced her control near the stream, a distant scream pierced the forest. Kalen's eyes darkened, and without a word, he drew her close and moved toward the sound. They arrived to find a small village at the forest's edge under attack, shadowy figures moving with speed and precision, taking what they wanted and vanishing before any resistance could form. Lyra's heart raced, and her magic flared instinctively, a golden light radiating from her hands. Kalen moved beside her, commanding the shadows to retreat, his power blending with hers in a dance of strength and control. Together they pushed the intruders back, their bond and combined power stronger than either had imagined. After the attackers fled, Lyra sank to her knees, exhausted but exhilarated. I did it," she whispered. Kalen knelt beside her, placing a steadying hand on her back. "Yes, but this is only the beginning. There will be more shadows, more threats. Your journey is far from over, and soon the one who has been watching you all along will make their move." Lyra's gaze hardened. The shadowy figure from the palace, the whispers of prophecy, the power in her blood, all of it converged in that moment. She realized that she could no longer run, hide, or doubt herself. She had to embrace her destiny, face the darkness, and discover the true extent of her strength. The forest whispered around them, ancient and eternal, a silent witness to the awakening of a power that could change the fate of the kingdom. And as Lyra looked at Kalen standing resolute beside her, she knew that whatever came next, she would not face it alone. But in the distance, hidden among the trees, a pair of eyes glimmered with cruel intent. The shadow had returned. The true test of Lyra's courage, her power, and her bond with Kalen was only just beginning. And as the moonlight reflected off the golden-crowned veil, Lyra felt a thrill of anticipation and fear. For the path ahead was dangerous, and the choices she would make could alter not only her fate but the fate of all Erendor. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying a whisper. The shadows are patient and they will not forget. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of her power, the weight of destiny, and the unspoken promise of Kalen beside her. She was no longer a girl of rags. She was a storm, and storms, once awakened, could not be tamed. The cursed realm lay before them like a shattered dream. Trees twisted unnaturally, their blackened branches clawing at a blood-red sky. Rivers ran dark as ink, reflecting jagged lightning that split the clouds with silent fury. The air was thick with the taste of magic, ancient and malevolent, as if the land itself was alive, breathing in shadow and malice. Lyra held tightly to the golden-crowned veil, the threads gleaming faintly even under the oppressive sky. Kalen walked beside her, sword drawn, eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. Though his presence was a comfort, the weight of what lay ahead pressed on them both. "This place, it feels alive," Lyra said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "Angry, hungry." Kalen nodded, his expression grim. "It is. This is the heart of the curse, the domain of those who would see your power twisted and used for destruction. The shadow that has followed you all this time, it will be here, and it will not hold back." Lyra swallowed, feeling the pulse of her magic stirring in response to the darkness around her. Fear whispered at the edges of her mind, but so did courage. She had come too far to turn back. She had learned control, focus, and strength, yet the forest of Erendor had been only practice. This realm was the true test. They moved forward cautiously, every step echoing across the jagged ground. Whispers floated on the wind, voices that seemed to call her name, urging doubt and hesitation. Lyra closed her eyes, centering herself, and let the rhythm of her heartbeat guide her. She felt Kalen beside her, steady, unwavering. Together, they walked into the dark heart of the realm. A sudden flash of light illuminated a figure in the distance, the cloaked shadow who had haunted Lyra since the palace. Its eyes glimmered like embers, fixed on her with intent that was both cruel and calculating. "You have come," the shadow hissed, "and yet you know nothing. Power without wisdom is a danger to yourself and to all who breathe this world." Kalen stepped protectively in front of Lyra. "You will not touch her," he said, his voice calm yet commanding. "Not while I stand." The shadow laughed, a sound like cracking ice, and surged forward with unnatural speed. Lyra felt the fire in her blood awaken fully, radiating outward in a golden glow that pushed back the darkness. Her magic responded instinctively to her fear, her courage, and her will to protect. "Focus, Lyra," Kaelin instructed. "Let your heart guide the power, not your fear." Lyra inhaled deeply and extended her hands. The crown veil shimmered, responding to her intent. Streams of golden energy pulsed outward, creating a protective barrier around them both. The shadow collided with it, hissing in frustration as it recoiled. "You are stronger than I imagined," the shadow sneered. "But strength alone is nothing without understanding." Kaelin nodded toward Lyra. "Then show them. Show yourself." Lyra's hands moved instinctively, the energy of the veil and her bloodline flowing together like a river. She could feel the curse that haunted her family, the dormant power, the danger, the history of destruction. But she no longer feared it. Instead, she embraced it, guiding it with thought, focus, and heart. The shadow faltered, unable to predict her will, and the realm itself seemed to respond to her courage. The battle was not just physical but emotional, a test of strength, heart, and control. Lyra's magic illuminated the darkness, golden threads of light weaving around Kaelin and herself. The shadow surged again, but she stood firm, her heart steady, her power balanced by understanding. "You see now," Kaelin said softly as they pressed forward, "your bloodline is a gift, not a curse. You can choose how to wield it. This is your moment." Lyra's mind raced. The shadow loomed again, ready to strike, and she realized that victory would not come from force alone. She needed to make a choice, not just to fight but to command her destiny. Closing her eyes, she reached deep within, touching the core of her magic and her heart at once. Golden light erupted from her chest, bright and pure, illuminating the cursed realm. The shadow shrieked, staggering backward as the force of her will expanded outward, not to destroy but to cleanse. The land itself seemed to breathe in relief, the twisted trees shivering and straightening, rivers flowing clear once more. Kaelin watched in awe as Lyra stepped forward, the crown veil glowing like a bridge between darkness and light. The shadow, realizing it could not win, let out one final scream before dissolving into nothingness, leaving only silence and the echo of the storm it had brought. Lyra fell to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. Kaelin knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. "You embraced yourself, and you have saved not just this realm but yourself." She looked up at him, tears of relief and pride glimmering in her eyes. I was afraid I would fail, that the curse would win, that I would lose control." Kaelin's gaze softened. "Fear is natural. It shows that you care, that you are alive. But courage is choosing to move forward despite fear. You have done that, Lyra, and in doing so you have broken the chains of the past." The forest, once twisted and threatening, now glowed softly in the golden light of her magic. Shadows receded, leaving only a calm, sacred stillness. The wind whispered through the trees like a sigh of relief. Lyra rose to her feet, her chest still racing but her mind clear. The crown veil shimmered around her shoulders, no longer a symbol of protection from others but a testament to her own strength and choice. Kaelin took her hand, holding it firmly but gently. "You have grown stronger than even I anticipated," he said. "Not because of me, but because of yourself." Lyra's heart stirred at his words. She had felt a connection to Kaelin since the first night at the ball, a bond that had deepened through trust, training, and shared danger. But now, after confronting the shadow and embracing her power, she understood something new. Their connection was not only attraction or protection, it was a partnership, a recognition of equal strength and courage. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said quietly. "Your guidance, your faith in me, it gave me strength." Kaelin's expression softened, and for the first time he allowed a small smile. "And I couldn't have asked for a better companion. You have reminded me that even a king must sometimes follow, and even a crown must bow to the courage of another." They walked back toward the edge of the cursed realm, hand in hand, feeling the pulse of the land returning to life. Rivers sparkled, leaves shimmered with renewed vitality, and the oppressive weight of darkness lifted. It was as though the realm itself had acknowledged Lyra's choice, her courage, her heart, her mastery of her bloodline. But even as peace settled, Kaelin's eyes scanned the horizon. "This is not the end," he said quietly. "The world beyond the shadows will test you still, but now you know that your strength is yours to wield. That knowledge will carry you farther than any sword." Lyra nodded, feeling a sense of completeness she had never known. The fear that had once gripped her heart had been transformed into power tempered by wisdom. She realized that the rags she had once worn, the scorn she had endured at the ball, and the shadows that had followed her were all part of the path that had brought her to this moment. For the first time, she understood her destiny. She was not a girl to be mocked or ignored. She was a force, a storm, a guardian of her own fate, and she would walk that path with Kaelin by her side, not as a ruler and subject, but as equals bound by trust, courage, and choice. The sun began to rise over the cursed realm, casting light across the newly healed land. Kaelin and Lyra stood side by side, their silhouettes framed by the golden glow. The crown veil shimmered around Lyra's shoulders, a symbol not just of royalty or protection, but of power, choice, and the courage to embrace destiny. And as the first bird sang over the restored forest, a soft whisper carried on the wind, a reminder that challenges would come again, shadows would rise, and the journey was never truly over. But Lyra felt ready. She had faced fear, embraced her power, and discovered the strength of her own heart. Kaelin placed his hand gently over hers, a silent promise. Together they would face whatever came next. The kingdom awaited, the prophecy unfulfilled, but they were ready. And in that golden light, Lyra finally understood. She was no longer a girl in rags. She was a queen of her own destiny. The crown veil shimmered in the morning sun, and the forest whispered a blessing. The storm had awakened, and the world would never be the same.